Right, good morning. We've got apologies from the Chair and Vice Chair this morning. Can I please ask members to appoint a Chair for the meeting, please?
Graham Nicholl.
Councillor Nicholl? Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome to this meeting, Audit and Risk Scrutiny Committee. There's one or two changes before we get started. I would propose that we take item 9 before item 8, members, and the supporting papers for agenda item 5 are not for agenda item 5 or for agenda item 6. Just to confuse you further. Okay. We'll start off with the Sederunt apologies. Claire, have you got apologies?
Thank you, Chair. We've got 6 members present this morning. As I've stated, we've got apologies from the Chair, Vice Chair, and also Councillors Howie and Ingalls. Councillor Ronnie currently not present.
An apology.
Okay.
Unless anybody's any other ideas, but I think it'll be an apology. Any declarations of interest? Don't say little or none. Okay. Minute of the meeting of the 21st of June 2018. Is that a correct minute? We'll take it due to the silence that it's accepted as a correct minute. Yes, you can say anything you like, provided it's good.
No, it was just to offer an apology to the committee that we do not at this meeting have the report on member complaints. It has been drafted, but just with other pressures of unexpected business over the last few weeks, we didn't get a chance to consult on it, so it will be at the next meeting, and I'm happy to discuss it around the political groups also before that meeting, if anyone would like that.
Excuse me, Rona, obviously you mentioned about member complaints and that. Will there be a workshop for members of this committee to discuss how the process is going to form and what the aims of this complaints committee? As I say, it's been raised by Councillor Scobie and myself in the past, and say we want it to suit our needs, not to suit the officers' needs.
Fully understand that. Certainly, we have some workshops planned for the scrutiny process, so we could use some of that time to discuss the member complaints or have a separate workshop for members on that. Happy to do that.
Councillor Johnson.
I find that a wee bit concerning because people get upset about how complaints are dealt with, and does this reflect the degree of importance you put on that? Because obviously you've got to prioritise your work. So I take it you thought that the report on how complaints were handled was less important than other things?
Certainly not, Councillor Johnston, but a lot of the time that was allocated to this was my time, and I've been on North West Campus for the last few weeks, so apologies for that. But that was, in I think the view of a number of people, a priority for the council.
Very good with the screwdriver. Did you wear your hard hat? Graham Bell wonders if you wore your hard hat in case something fell on you. Right, can we move on? Are we agreed in a minute? Yes, okay, thank you. Right, item 4 is report by external audit on the 2017-18 audit of Dumfries and Galloway Council. Report by Head of Finance and Procurement. Have you anything to add to this report, Paul?
Nothing to add, Chair, but Joe from the external auditors will introduce the report.
My apologies, I should have introduced you. I understand your name is Joanne Brown, and the young gentleman with you, what's your name? Yes, a good Scottish name, that was given to me earlier on as well. Aye, well, we've got one the same in our group, his name's Justy, but anyway, he's not here today. So, carry on, Angela. Not Angela, Joanne.
Thanks, Chair. Our report here concludes on our 17-18 external audit. It's in draft as it's just subject to this committee discussion, and after this committee will sign the financial statements and receive the signed letter of representation. Just for the purposes of the minutes, just to clarify, we are independent of the council and we have no non-audit fees or services. So our external audit fee was the same fee that we agreed and set out in our plan. The most important thing to note is it's an unqualified opinion with a paragraph in the opinion which is an except for paragraph, and that relates to the statutory trading organisations and the failure to break even over that 3-year period. Members will be familiar with that except for paragraph. It was in the accounts this time last year as well. Just like to offer our thanks to the council officers, in particular the finance team, for their support and assistance with our external audit and the quick turnaround of our queries. And if we just, Angelo will just touch on the key messages in our report, and then I'd be happy to take questions.
Thanks, Joanne. So just to echo what Joanne mentioned there in terms of our thanks to the officers, I feel that overall the audit went very well, and we built on our relationships with the officers, which has led to a high quality and efficient audit. Just referring to page 12 of our report, the at a glance, just like to mention, in completing our audit, we have fulfilled our responsibilities per the International Standards of Auditing and the Audit Scotland Code of Audit Practice. Our approach to materiality was unchanged from what we communicated in our audit plan in April. However, we have updated our materiality based on the gross expenditure amount from the draft financial statements. Our testing of the significant risk areas highlighted in our plan was completed with no issues noted. There were 2 adjustments, which are also at the back of the report, made to the financial statements as a result of the audit. The first being first relating to an actuarial estimation difference, and the second relating to a reclassification of a small amount of debt from long to short term. These were issues that arose as opposed to we came across them, and the officers were very helpful in processing the adjustments to the financial statements. Moving on to page 20 of the report, where we touch on our wider scope. We have also fulfilled the responsibilities of the Audit Scotland Code of Audit Practice in relation to the wider scope areas, being financial sustainability, financial management, governance and transparency, and value for money. Similar to our councils, Dumfries and Galloway face significant challenges in the coming years. The council has managed its financial position very well, delivering savings of up to 86 million since 2010-11. However, it faces significant financial challenge in the medium terms and forecasts it will need to save an additional 56 million over the period of 1920 to 2022-23. We have been working closely with Audit Scotland on the Best Value Assurance Report, which is due to be published at the end of November 2018, and that will touch further on the financial challenges faced by the council. On page 37 of our report, we touch on agreed actions and recommendations that we've put to the officers, and the officers have agreed a plan of action to resolve said recommendations, and we have also provided an update on prior year actions and recommendations. That's all I was going to say on the report, but happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. I have one before we start. Joanne mentioned fees. It's 322,000, which is a sizable sum of money. Do Audit Scotland take a skin off the top before you get paid?
If I look at page 42 of the papers, that includes a breakdown of our external audit fee. You can see at the top figure there, that is the external audit fee that we receive from Audit Scotland. There are additional costs in there, including the contribution to the performance and audit team of Audit Scotland, which is the 96,000, and that's how the fee's broken up. So there is a proportionment around costs associated with best value and then overheads for Audit Scotland. So yes, is the first answer.
You work for your money. I'm just wondering what they do for theirs. But anyway, that's maybe not a question you can answer. Members, any questions? Graham Bell.
Chair, just mentioned obviously the audit fee in that £322,000. Is that comparable to other local authorities, or is this broken down to various departments, or is it broken down at head of population?
In terms of how Audit Scotland calculate the fee range, they take into account the variation in size of local authority across Scotland. They take account of risk profile, and they take account of sort of proportionment of grant funding from Scottish Government to each council. Certainly happy to share the breakdown. This fee is comparable with a council of your size. If you're looking at the likes of your Edinburgh or your Glasgow councils, they are significantly higher in terms of fees.
Chair, thanks. Anyway, obviously on page 38, you look at financial delivery of the 2018-29 plans and beyond, and obviously there's savings review done within service committees are ongoing all the time. That's always been practice of the council, and the internal auditor will monitor the savings, and also the head of finance will be monitoring. What additional work are Audit Scotland looking for from the council? Is there any additional work you need to find out, or anything there that's not within the savings plans projected with the service committees?
So I think just then reflecting on the Accounts Commission and their strategic priorities and their areas of focus, they recognise that all local authorities face significant financial challenges over the medium to longer term, particularly a sort of up in pace in terms of the need to deliver savings. Their focus is around the delivery of those savings plans, the agreement of those saving plans, and how officers and elected members work together to take what could become difficult decisions related to the financial position. And they are just very keen around leadership and ultimately oversight and governance around the savings programmes that local authorities have in place. It's a particular theme that comes through in each of the best value assurance reports, and it is another theme that will come through in your best value assurance report around the importance of taking those decisions and then the follow through of implementation of savings.
Patsy?
Yeah, can I just ask about financial sustainability? It's on page 24 of, not of your report, but of the first bit of the papers. And, you know, you say that in the up to 2023, we're going to have to raise savings of 56 million. And then you say at the moment that the 2018-19 financial planning assumptions appear to be reasonable. What I'm just wondering is, do we have any planning assumptions for the next 4 years that are in place? Because we can't just do it on a yearly situation. So I just wonder what we've got in place to be sustainable for the next foreseeable 5 years.
Yes, absolutely. Members have considered at full council a 5-year financial strategy which details each of the assumptions that the council has in relation to grant levels, inflation levels, pay awards and so on. That was initially considered by full council in September last year and was updated following the budget setting in February. So the last time members saw that was in March. We'll continue to update that during the budget process. But those financial assumptions are clearly outlined in that strategy report.
But, Joanne, do you feel that the assumptions that are there are reasonable as well? I mean, 'cause that's what we need from you.
Yeah, as Paul outlined, there's a series of some assumptions that are based on various scenarios and forecasts across that 5-year period. From our perspective, they are reasonable, and what we've done is had a look across a number of other local authorities for their assumptions, and the assumptions you have are very comparable. It's set out in a strategy document which keeps getting reviewed and revisited depending on what happens in the landscape. So from our perspective, it's reasonable based on the information available.
That's on a different note here. Obviously, page 102, we're looking at debtor provisions and whatnot. You know, £6.5 million. Obviously, debt's a major problem for the Dumfries and Galloway Council. As you know, we've got serious borrowings within this council that actually escalate, and I've got concerns about it. Looking at the debts at £6.5 million, is there any way we can tighten up this provision of debt? You know, I'm not talking about council tax, writing off some of the people who haven't paid council tax, as to liabilities and whatnot. Just wondering, there's risks here. It concerns me. Is there any other ways we could pull in some of this debt?
The council monitors its debt on a regular basis and we make appropriate provision for bad and doubtful debts as well. we have not seen a significant increase in our level of debtors or in our level of bad debts over recent years. It's something that we continue to monitor in detail, try to ensure that we maximise recovery under each of our categories of debtors, and we do have 6 monthly reports to Policy and Resources Committee to give members full details on levels of collection and also on any write-offs that we've undertaken. So that's something we'll continue to do on an ongoing basis.
So, Paul, you're saying that 6 monthly reports going to the Policy and Resources Committee regarding debts and that. Is that the normal timescale for the council? But me being self-employed, if someone owes me, I want them within 6 weeks.
That's the reporting timescale. It actually used to be annual till about 18 months ago when we moved it to a 6 monthly basis to give members more regular information. But it's a daily process. We are continually chasing our debts through a range of means, so it's not something that we have any delays in relation to.
Back on that again, Paul. At the end of the day, you know, if someone's running a business and you let people in for months, 3-4 months, it drags on. It's harder to get money out the well over a period of time. And I think, you know, we need to tighten up this. I would think we need to push for stringent measures in dealing with this debt.
Happy to support that, and that is something that we continually seek to develop.
Councillor Scobie, my apologies.
Bricks and Hielanman come to mind there. However, I'm looking at page 20 of the report, and the point where the council faces significant financial challenges over the coming years. That's really an understatement in respect of the 56 million that's referred to in here as savings that need to be found by 2019-2020. And then Patsy went on to refer to page 24. And the council faces major challenges. It must make savings and significantly change how services are delivered across widely dispersed and rural communities. It must maintain focus on its strategic priorities and respond to local priorities and issues. And again, I look at what Graham was talking about on page 38. Management responds to this. We will continue to actively monitor savings, deliver and ensure scrutiny of further savings options put forward. Action owner, and that's the head of finance, that's yourself, Paul. I just wonder if Audit Scotland, or indeed yourself, Paul, if the council is at risk of not delivering on what we are legally obliged to deliver as we continue to cut further and further into the bone with these savings. And are we, has the Audit Scotland looked at whether we're coming close to where we may not be delivering on what is legal? We're legally obliged to deliver, notwithstanding the priorities of the communities.
Don't fall out about it, folks.
No. Yes, obviously consideration of our legal responsibilities is a key part of budget setting on a regular basis. At the minute, we are ensuring that we do address each of our statutory requirements, but there is increasing pressure on services. We have to live within our means as well, which is also a requirement. But as each budget process is taken forward, we will have a look at what are our statutory responsibilities and seek to ensure that we address both those and the council's agreed priorities. It is getting harder, but it is something we'll continue to try and ensure that we undertake.
Can I come back on that, because the Chief Executive spoke of it at full council only on Tuesday, and reference to the Dumfries campus, where he did say that politically it's about the reputation of the council in these situations. And I would see cuts as one of those. And only this week, and I'm quoting from the local paper, the Free Press, anger at state of hotel. And rather than being anecdotal, let me give you an example. And the vote is clear here in terms of the state outside the hotel on the public road. And as we go further and further into savings, it's almost, and I made reference to it, the light's on but there's nobody in. And that's where people are put at risk of the way that we have put up, the council has put up barriers outside the George Hotel. on the main thoroughfare. Now, if we're unable by the continual cuts to services, are we at risk of not only our council's reputation, but of someone getting seriously injured on some of these issues? And it's clear here, the photos are here. When is it going to stop? You know, and has Audit Scotland looked at this in the 56 million in terms of legal responsibilities, council at risk, reputation and everything?
So from an external audit perspective, one of the things we've considered and looked at around your savings plans and your approach to transformation and the way that you'll look at service redesign and business case is to consider that council risk assessment. So there's a series of risks that are built into those savings plans, which consider things around political risk, reputational risk, statutory service risk. And I think as you go further forward around your financial savings that you need to deliver, the council's risk management arrangements will play an increasingly important part around that in terms of understanding the risks and being able to weigh up those risks and be able to take a balanced view, accepting that looking ahead there will be risks you need to take, but it's from an external audit perspective, we would look at, well, how do you understand those risks and what controls can you put in place to mitigate the risks, and how is risk factored into the decision-making process? So at an individual savings level, there is risk assessments that sit behind each of the savings proposals that are being worked up just now.
Yeah, Chair, I'm grateful for the clarification and explanation, but it doesn't fill me with much confidence in terms of how we move forward, and that was the point I made on Tuesday at the full council. I think we've got to get a handle on the situation as to just what these risks are for an Audit and Risk and Scrutiny Committee as we move forward. Because it's one thing taking, at Service Committee a decision in terms of we're going to balance the budget, but it's the risk that's associated with that. And if we are to function as a Scrutiny and Audit Committee, we need to understand that. Because I've just highlighted one example rather than being anecdotal. These are the risks that we run. And I haven't even touched on IGB and whether we're getting value for money in terms of the money that we provide. Because I did ask at one of the Audit and Risk Committee meetings when you were you were just appointed. But I don't see it in here in terms of are we getting value for money there. So that's a separate issue. I think that we as an Audit Committee need to get to grips in terms of all these templates and just what are the risks that we face as we move forward in the savings. So it's not just for the Service Committee to say, right, we're going to balance the budget and hey-ho. We've got to be sure that these risks are being scrutinised.
Joanne?
I think just picking up on your point there's a paper further on around the council's risk management arrangements and proposals around risk management training and how to think about how this committee looks at risk management. And I would encourage you to do that, and I think that's a really useful opportunity for you to then think around what are the strategic risks facing the council, how the controls and assurance, and as a committee, what assurance do you get around those mitigating controls, and to further explore risk management. And I think that's a welcome opportunity, and the paper later today kickstarts that, so that's a good opportunity.
Councillor Gilroy.
Thank you. I'm looking at page 25, and it's to do with the Corporate Change Fund, and I wonder if you could explain things a little bit to me. It says here at the bottom of the page that it's used to support the delivery of change, savings and efficiency, but it's reduced almost by half from April the 1st, 2017 to the 31st of March, 2018. And then in the next paragraph it says, given the scale of the financial challenges, going to use the non-earmarked general reserves. So that's different. The non-earmarked general reserves are different to the Corporate Change Fund. But I just wonder what we've got to have in place so that we're safe, so that we don't move things around and end up with no earmarked reserves or anything, and then we're in trouble. And I just wonder if we are at risk of doing that by sort of wiring money from one corporate change fund from the non-earmarked reserves or not. And I don't quite understand how we do that. And then I don't know quite what the other earmarked reserves are. So I'm a bit confused by the whole of that paragraph.
If I just pick up what we looked at from an external audit perspective, and then if I leave Paul just to explain the mechanics of how things happen around your reserves and earmarked and non-earmarked. One of the things that we do look at is the availability of your reserves, particularly that non-earmarked reserves, and we look at that in comparison to other local authorities, because effectively that's a contingency fund. So if for some reason a saving doesn't get delivered as planned, then we look at, well, what reserves as a council do you have to accommodate that, at least in the short term? And where you are is very comparable to a number of councils in terms of the proportion that you have in reserves. So from our perspective, looking at your financial plan, you've got reserves there should something unforeseen happen, but that's just there as a contingency. So there are other councils across Scotland which, for one reason or another, don't have that same level of reserve, where there's more of a critical comment in around needing to build back reserves. Whereas at the moment, your reserves are consistent with the policy you set and in line with what we would expect councils to have.
Good question on that. So if there was a savings that was identified to be taken, but the council didn't manage to take it, they could just help themselves to some money for not delivering that saving from the non-earmarked reserves. So there isn't. I'm just kind of worried that people that there's a feeling that can just be tapped into willy-nilly because it's there, and that that we're in danger of, it can just slip away if you're not careful.
Yes, this council does have an agreed policy, an agreed budget principle that we will maintain what we call it's referred to as non-earmarked reserves here. We tend to refer to it as unallocated general fund balances. We have an agreed policy to seek to maintain that at 2% of annual planned expenditure, and that's something we've been able to do over a series of years. One of the reasons we set up the Change Fund was to recognise that there needs to be investment in the savings that we need to make, but we didn't feel as though it was appropriate to take that from our unallocated general fund balances. That's something we're continuing to do to ensure that we would maintain that 2% for contingencies, because there is things that happen, whether it's severe weather, a disaster of some nature, cash flow movements. Maintaining that 2% is an essential part of good financial management. That is our agreed principle. We will continue to use the Change Fund to invest in the delivery of our savings. As you've highlighted, it is falling at the minute. It's actually fallen a bit further in the current financial year to date, and we're currently identifying an opportunity to seek to rebuild that, because that need for investment in savings will continue beyond the current financial year. But we'll try and maintain the same approach as what we've had in recent years to date.
So, but you're not going to rebuild it by helping yourself to the non-earmarked reserves?
Absolutely not, no.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. It's the recommendation on page 37, item 1, about heritage assets and valuations. I just wonder why we've set the timescale for implication as April, when that will knock it into the following financial year. Would it not have been possible to make it March? And by reading the second paragraph on the left-hand side, it would appear to have been a requirement that we carried this out before the 30th of June each year, and it doesn't seem to have happened. So that's really what I was concerned about on that particular page. I've got other questions. So.
I suppose the key to that timescale is our valuations need to be as at the 31st of March, so it would be April by the time that we actually got those valuations back through. So that's why we chose April as the timescale, because that's normally the time when we collate it, because obviously it needs to be after the 31st of March, so it will be implemented for next year's annual accounts, but it's just the timing of it. And again, it's the same with the June valuations. As I said, all the valuations are done at the 31st of March, so it tends to be the end of April, the start of May, before we get all the final valuations through. So that's the sort of reason for the timescales.
That's good. So it is a valuation at 31st March. That's absolutely fine. Now, the next thing is, I don't know if you've stressed enough the risk from this transformation. You've got on page 61, develop a smaller, more flexibly skilled workforce for the future. Now that's good, but quite a desirable goal. But as far as I can see, there's a massive risk with this, given that we're relying on ERVS predominantly to reduce the workforce, and that year on year has proved problematic. We seem to have a carried forward balance of underachieved savings coming from that, and I don't see how we can get beyond that. And the other problem is, we talk about more flexible and skilled workforce. If we're relying on ERVS, we're then having to retrain people to go into other jobs all the time. And I take myself as an example. I mean, no amount of retraining will turn me into an Olympic pole vaulter. So are we going to be able to take the staff we've got left that haven't taken ERVS and train them up to the required standard? And I think that is an absolutely significant risk, especially for service delivery. So I think that risk needs to be stressed slightly stronger.
Paul?
Just to say that risk is recognised. We, as you say, can't continue to rely on ERVS. It needs to be one of the tools, but it's only one, and there's a range of other things we need to do to help reduce and improve the flexibility of our workforce. Redeployment is a key element of that. I appreciate the example you gave, but there's 6,500 jobs in the council, and there is similarities between a significant number of those. So there is opportunities for people, rather than face loss of roles, but actually look to seek other roles within the council in areas where service needs to be maintained. So that does need to be an increasing part of our approach to reducing our workforce going forward. But ERVS will continue to be a key element of it, but it's not the only thing we need to focus on to reduce the workforce.
You happy with that, Councillor Johnson?
Yeah, I fully realise that. It's just like I say, I just perhaps see it maybe as a bigger risk, going forward, and particularly from Willie's remarks about service delivery. And we reach the stage where we can't deliver services, and then we've got a serious problem.
Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, I hate being anecdotal, but again, can I give you another example? If I turn to page 32, and it's maybe to ask Angelo and Joanne, perhaps not, it's not contained in this report, but for the next one, and in respect of what you audit. If I look at the strategic priorities, and one is provide the best start in life for our children, and only from Tuesday, I have circulated an email that I have put to the Acting Director of Education, because the answer I got on Tuesday was not satisfactory, in my opinion. And that's where, are we providing the best start in life for kids who need additional support? Are we providing for the number of hours that are required in additional support by the number of people that we employ? So in that respect, I would hope that you, Joanne, and Angelo, could look at that. Are we providing what is required for additional support for kids who need it, who may be under legal, we may be under legal responsibility under the corporate support plan and the child's plan, and we may not be delivering that. And these are the challenges that I refer to. Likewise, on the one below, protect our most vulnerable people. When we have a huge inadequacy of care homes west of the region. No respite for many of the people who need it, but we don't seem to be tackling that problem west of the region in particular. So when you're looking at these, I would just ask, if it's if that's within the remit, ask the Audit Scotland to look at these two parts and come back and tell us, because we're at risk of not delivering what we are legally obliged to do for kids who need it. And only in last week, and I referred to it again on Tuesday, was we are failing 1 in 4 children in assessing their poor mental health. And that's the risk that this council is running, and I dare say many other councils, but we're particularly concerned with our own council, and I would like Audit Scotland to look at these. Not only for are we getting value for money, but are we delivering the service that people are entitled to? In those two aspects alone. And I'm quite happy to share my email with the two auditors.
So I suppose, from my perspective, appreciating the points you've made, I think in terms of the role of external audit, that doesn't necessarily fall within the role of external audit. I think what you will see commentary on in the Best Value Assurance report, and you will see us as external auditors looking at, is effectively some of the performance management arrangements around those priorities, and auditors often talk about a golden thread, but how from that strategic priority does that flow through to your performance framework, to your measures, your outcomes, reporting of delivery? And that is something that has been considered as part of the Best Value Assurance report. I think there's maybe something in there for Service Committee and performance framework around, are you then got the best performance measures to report on the outcomes you're looking for? But I wouldn't see that as falling under the external audit remit.
Councillor Gilroy?
It's going back to what Malcolm was talking about, and the ERVS and then the retraining. And I would suggest there is a high risk of expectation that you can retrain people to a degree that they're not able to do, and so you're setting people up to fail. Along with that comes stress. Along with that comes illness, mental illness, physical illness, whatever you like. And I just wonder if the council has taken on the risk with all this taking voluntary redundancies and all the rest of it. And I just wonder if anybody is really, really looking at it as to whether it's the best way forward.
We're good at that. Square pegs, round holes, Northwest Campus. Would anyone wish to answer that?
Just to say that the council has established what we call a workforce transition board to look at how best to manage the changes required in our workforce over the upcoming period. They'll be taking into account a range of risks and concerns, whether their HR are heavily represented on that board, to try and ensure some of those issues are fully taken into account. So there are risks that are recognised and will have to be managed as we take this process forward. And it is recognised as well that there are a large number of jobs where redeployment isn't appropriate, so the focus needs to be on those areas of work where there is similarities, where there is opportunity to train people up and to take advantages in those areas.
Do we go in, or the HR goes in after a year of a transformation, and to assess whether that person is actually doing the job well or appropriately, or is struggling? I mean, does somebody check that we're not putting people into a situation where they're not able to cope? Because that would be the worst thing as an employer that we could possibly do. Because it creates such problems, and then you're left without the ability to deliver the services we have to deliver, never mind the ones that we want to.
Yes, my understanding is that HR keep in touch with both redeployed employees and with the new managers to try and ensure that things are bedded in appropriately, that any concerns are addressed. To be honest, we've not really done it on a significant scale to date, so that will become more challenging as this is taken forward, but certainly HR do continue to have that overview of how effective those redeployment arrangements are.
Before I bring in Graham Bell and then Karen Crothers, could I just ask a question? Stress management of the individuals who've maybe been put into these jobs and they maybe just hardly coping with it. Do we monitor the stress management of those people?
Yeah, I mean, just under those same arrangements that I explained, HR keep in contact with the employees to try and ensure those issues are addressed. I have to admit I'm not an expert in that area, but my understanding is that there is that ongoing contact to support people when they're in new roles.
Karen, was it the same point?
Thanks. It's just, and I think that's a really important point that Pat's actually brought up, and it's about how much staff feel that they're engaged and listened to in that whole process, And I think that is key. We really need to look at that, or we are going to cause more problems down the line, not only what's happened recently, but putting staff at risk for mental health problems.
Councillor Bell and then Councillor Johnson.
Councillor Johnson, Malcolm was mentioned about the ERVS and that. As you say, a number of experienced staff have left the council, and training them up and training new people up is quite a difficult thing. But this council is not run like a business. If my business, I'm looking at my business and cash flow over a period of time, and I feel I've got too many staff, make them redundant. This council's got a policy of no redundancy, and there's just going to be stranglehold savings for years to come. It's very, very difficult, but the only way to make a business leaner and fitter, or even a council, is shed labour. Like it or lump it, but that's the only answer.
That's a political decision, and under this present regime, we'd have. That's right. Councillor Johnson, did you want in?
I was really just on the point that Patsy and Karen raised as well. Engagement with staff. We've got one directorate that's only managing to give people annual appraisals. 52% of the staff. Really, I don't think we are looking at that seriously.
Happy to feed those comments back. I know that's an area where HR are looking to try and certainly improve that. There's a fair way to go, but certainly feed those comments back.
Yeah, 52% is hardly plenty. Councillor Gilroy.
Well, can I just say that it should maybe be can it be a recommendation from this committee that we ask them to do that, because it gets lost in, I'll take it back, with all due respect, Paul, I'm sure you will, but if it's not a directive from a committee, it can just get sort of put to one side a little bit and nobody actually deals with it. And I think we've all raised it, that it's a potential problem. It's obviously, with recent things that have happened with staff, it's obviously been a problem, and we need to seriously, it's a risk to the council if we don't get it right.
I've got one or two things I would like to bring up. Materiality was set at 1.7%, as opposed to 1% the previous year. Now that is a 70% increase, if you want to be pedantic. Can you explain to me what that's about and how it works? Somebody?
So in terms of materiality, that's us looking at what an error in the financial statements could mean in terms of the reader of the accounts and users of the accounts. It was set at 1% last year because that was our first year as your external auditor. This year is our second year, so we have a much better understanding of the council's controls, the council's environment, and therefore we felt it was appropriate to set a higher materiality level. What it means really is around the level of our testing, the values we pick in terms of our sampling, and then how we actually undertake the audit work. We satisfy ourselves during the year-end audit process that materiality still remains appropriate. So if we were coming up with big adjustments to the accounts, which we didn't in this case at all, we would then reflect on whether that materiality was set too high or too low. But materiality, we were comfortable at the level we set it at.
You're comfortable at 1.7% as opposed to 1%. Is that what you're saying?
So typically under our external audit methodology and under international auditing standards, it's up to us to determine materiality. Our benchmark is usually within the range of 1% and 2%. So 2% would be our maximum materiality and 1% at the lower end. We were comfortable based on our understanding and risk assessment that 1.7 was an appropriate amount for this year.
Okay. My next point I would like to bring up is that significant trading operations. The Council Statutory Service has not achieved the statutory 3-year rolling break-even position. We have included this as another matter in our audit opinion. Achieving a recurring surplus position for the STOs continues to be a challenge for the Council. That's putting it mildly. But we now acquired over a 3-year rolling period 1.326 million of under recovery, is that what they call it, or losses. If it was any other business, there would be somebody would be putting a pen through it. could somebody make some comment on that and how we're going to return that to a positive situation?
Yes, both these services have been subject to detailed review and consideration through the EEI committee recently. In terms of the roads maintenance service, there's been a number of changes. The end of the trunk roads contract with Transerve effectively is removed. The road service from a trading activity were effectively a internal council service. Again, now we actually merged the roads function into the general fund side of the road service. That was reflected in the report to the EI committee last month, so it's been brought together. So there's a much reduced level of trading or reliance on external income for the road service going forward, so that reduces the risk in relation to roads. However, there is a need to seek further efficiencies within the new combined service to try and achieve further savings and try and ensure that the maximum benefit from the budget the council applies to roads is actually received. So that's the changes that have been made there. In terms of the building maintenance service, it's slightly different, but there's similarities. We reviewed in detail with management there the reasons for the under recovery in 2017-18. They've got revised plans for the current financial year, and we're liaising with both them and with their internal customers to ensure that those plans remain realistic and adjusted where necessary. However, there has been a further development, which I think members are aware of, in terms of there's been notification that we will no longer have the Lorburn contract beyond the end of the current financial year. So effectively it's likely that that will be removed from trading services as well and become an internal council service, and that will be subject to further detailed review through both the EI committee and the Enterprise and Services subcommittee.
So that's one less loss we should make.
Yes, but we will not be trading. That doesn't mean that those services don't need to improve their performance and make efficiencies, but it will be through a different route now.
Just on that, Paul, and maybe Rona or you could get this back to the relevant officer, but I asked a question at the last Enterprising DG committee. I was promised it was confidential and I'd been told the answer offline. I have since spoken to the head of service, and I see you got papers yesterday for another Enterprising DG committee, and I still haven't had an answer. So could somebody please do something about that? It's not good enough. Any other questions on the things for? Are we happy with the report? Or happy is maybe not the right word, but are we? Is there anything else we should be? We need to add something written down somewhere else. I can't bloody find it. There are numerous recommendations later on in the report. Action recommendations on page 37 and 38, and follow up from 2016-17 recommendations in the subsequent pages to that. Is everyone content with those? Some are ongoing, some are closed. I presume closed means they've been dealt with. Yeah. Effectively or ineffectively.
Yeah, just for committee's assurance, where we've said those have been closed, we're comfortable with the management update and that is no longer an action required.
I'm assuming that you do this for other councils. Is that a correct assumption? And you will also, through Audit Scotland be in connection, you'll have an idea of what other councils are, how they're performing or how they're doing. Are we top of the list, bottom of the list?
The top or bottom of the list is quite a hard question to answer. And as an auditor, I'd probably try and duck it. I think we're the external auditor of another council of a similar size with some remote rural challenges as well. We're also very linked into Audit Scotland around their performance studies, and what Audit Scotland produced of everybody's draft annual report and accounts is effectively a database which benchmarks your financial information compared to other councils, so we can check where you are in terms of if an outlier or not. I think the recommendations in here are very similar to what you'll see at other local authorities this year, particularly focused on the financial sustainability and the level of challenge ahead. That will be consistent, I suspect, across all 32 councils. I wouldn't say you were top of the list, and I wouldn't say you were bottom of the list. So in a typical auditor answer, a steady middle of the road. And I think there's worse places to be.
Yeah, at the bottom's the worst bit. Any members, any other questions on this subject? Okay, can we go to the recommendations? Have you got anything, Rona? No. Good. There's the start. Right, we've received the external auditor's report. Are we happy to approve the letter of representation to be certified by the Head of Finance and Procurement and appended to the audit report in Appendix 2? Happy to do that, members? Approve the audited accounts, which will be certified by the Head of Finance and Procurement and Grant Thornton. Happy to do that? And note that the certified accounts will be made available to all members before the 31st of October 2018, when they will be available on the Council's website as detailed. Okay? Councillor Gilroy.
It was just to send a recommendation to the HR department that we have raised a concern that there is a risk to the council with.
I think the officers,
can we do that? So can we have that minuted?
Yes.
No, we'll certainly minute the recommendation to stress the importance of PDRs and also the role of HR and checking on staff and redeployment and their managers. We'll minute that and I'll feed it back as well.
Okay. Right. Sorry, Councillor.
I'm quite happy with the recommendation and agreeing them, but it's, that's one that we looked at in terms of HR and to monitor our voluntary retirement or whatever. But also that we do look, and I know there's an issue further on in terms of the training on risk for this committee. I think we do need to really hone in on that in terms of the savings that need to be found. I think we need to record that we've got to seriously look at the whole implication, ramifications of risk to the council in terms of looking for its savings.
Okay. Do you want that as another recommendation?
I think we need to record it, so I would hope that could be the recommendation, that we do look very closely at this, and training is essential. It's
Any
part
members?
of the further agenda.
You got that minuted? Well, yes, we'll deal with it next at the relevant item.
If we could deal with that at the risk item, would that be in order?
Okay. Right. Item 5, follow-up of internal audit reports issued between January and June 2018. Mr. Fox, please feel free to take the hot seat. Mr. Fox, have you anything you wish to add to the report?
No, thank you, Chair, but happy to take questions.
Members? Any? Councillor Gilroy?
Thank you. It's the pupil equity funding. I'm not sure how much money is involved in this, and if it's secondary schools and primary schools. I mean, the thing that pinged out at me a little bit was that when on page 152, at the end of the financial year, the Scottish Government announced that schools could carry forward, and there were 29 schools carrying forward, equivalent of 282,000, which seems to me a lot of schools carrying things forward and not used their money, or there's been a problem using the money. And I'm just not hugely sure about how this actually works and how we monitor whether the attainment is better. It says it's not dealing with individuals, it's dealing with groups, and whether it was set up to do that, or feel this is just money that's been thrown at something and we're not sure whether it's working or not. And I'm not guided by anything in here.
Thank you. First of all, the amount of funding we're talking about is in the region of £3 million.
Okay.
This audit was done in the first year that the funding came to the council. And I think the audit recognised the fact that things were in the early stages, and what we found during the audit was that procedures probably weren't as robust as we would possibly like. And what the management follow-up reflects in this paper to you is the fact that they're now putting more measures in place to have a challenge panel for how the money is being used as we take this process forward. And the other thing to note is, I think there's been a previous request that this be included in next year's audit plan,
Yes.
which will be in the third year of the funding. So we'll have another opportunity to look at whether the systems are now a bit more robust to see how the money's being used.
Could I just follow on? Sorry. So is that 3 million every year, or is that the total that's going to be? I mean, how long does this last for? This funding?
In answer to how long the funding would go on, I'm not actually sure of that answer. As far as I know, it's ongoing funding from the Scottish Government, but I may be wrong in that.
Okay, so I mean, it's quite a big tranche of money, and I don't sit on SIPL, so I'm not sure whether they monitor it well. But I just have this awful feeling that it's sitting there just floating about, not really achieving very much, and not delivering what it was meant to do. Because I have no idea whether it is, when we look at this report, whether it's doing what it's meant to be doing. And I hope somebody else is looking at it in the council, like SIPL or something, because at this committee we don't seem to be getting down to how many children it's dealing with. It says that the scrutiny officer, it was appointed for 1 year, and that post is now ended. So who's scrutinising it? Does it just go to head teachers and they just do what they want? I just have no idea.
We could ask for a detailed report back at another meeting. Councillor Scobie, you wish to come in?
Yeah, Audit and Risk had the two officers at a previous meeting before us, and they said as well that it was difficult for them to assess if we were making progress on this. I think that this is a target that has been set by the Scottish Government to reduce the attainment gap, and it very much focused on, children who are on free school meals and so forth and so on. But only last night I was at a parent council meeting, and head teachers aren't sure how this is going to be assessed in terms of whether we're reaching these targets, because I don't know if there's been a criteria set other than the criterion that we're going to reduce this attainment gap. But I think that was put over by the two officials that were here at the audit committee previous. I think it was 2 meetings ago, and that they had till, was it September 2019 to make the final report and then come up and see just how effective this PEF funding was. But I would hope, schools, and I don't say they're using it wrongly, but, they're under severe pressure in terms of their budget, and PEF has come along and maybe filled that gap. But, the Scottish Government may come down and say, well, we haven't, but they haven't set the criteria in which, as I understand it, this funding will be assessed. If I'm correct in that. So, head teachers, it's money that's welcomed, but we're not sure, as Patsy's highlighting there, whether, there's been targets set for us to judge against. It's cack-handed,
I think
to say the least.
that just backs up what Patsy was alluding to, that this money's sloshing about there, nobody really knows what to be doing with it. Karen, do you wish to come in this as well?
Yeah, it's just in the fact you'd kind of mentioned £3 million, and I don't know yet whether that is every year or... So it's every year, but we don't know for how long. Is that right? How many years, we don't know.
My apologies, I'm not sure what the Scottish Government plans are for this. I know that they awarded £120 million across Scotland for this funding on the basis of £1,200 for each child on preschool meals. And at the start of the process, when we audited, the instruction to councils was that supervision should be on a light touch basis, and that parents should be involved in the use of the funding through parent councils, which is probably where Councillor Scobie was involved in the discussions. And I know that as a result of the audit and other discussions within SIPL, there's been more of a challenge process, because when we did the audit, we noticed that there were a variety of ways in which the funding was being used. And I'm not an educationalist, but some of it seemed to myself to be more effective than others. But I'm not an expert on a particular subject.
I think the comment a variety of ways it's being used is maybe being quite polite. Councillor, one of you.
Thanks. Well, it was just the fact that I don't know how schools can actually make improvements if A, they didn't really care what they're supposed to be spending it on, and B, how long it'll actually last for. I don't know how meaningful this whole thing is, and
hence you get a variety of uses of this money. Patsy? No.
I'm just quite interested on the £1,200 per child on a free school meal. So if Mary's on a free school meal, does Mary get that £1,200 spent on her education so that she can either read better or spell or do her maths better or do science more or whatever it might be? And we have no idea. And it's just that's a generalisation. That I don't know whether that is just an extraordinary thing, because what do you spend the money on? This is an absolute audit that should be dealt with, because, and then if you want people to reduce the attainment gap, you've got to have somewhere to start. So what is the attainment to begin with that we're going to try and reduce? Is it that every primary school child will be able to read X amount by the time they get to 8 or 11 and do their times tables? I suppose they don't do that anymore, but time they get to 10, and do we assess whether they're doing that? Presumably SIPL are doing that anyway. I just don't get this.
I think a discussion that I had with a few head teachers from another area was that their concern was that it would be used instead of other funding for mainstream purposes, and that wasn't that wasn't what it was there for. And some very touching stories of head teachers seeing that maybe a boy or a girl didn't have some sports shoes, and that stopped them taking part in things. And there's a number of different uses and quite I think correct uses of the money to enable children to participate in things.
It's not all about participation. What they're doing here is saying it's for attainment. Whether you've got a pair of gym shoes or not, it's not going to make much difference.
But I think they can attain some qualifications if they're not able to participate, and that could be travel and having the right equipment, etc. So I think there needs to. I think that's why it was left quite loose in the first place, depend on the individual circumstances of the child.
There's loose and loose.
Yeah, I think we've got to be careful equally, because the money's welcome, and I think we should look for that to be continued. I think head teachers are being quite innovative in how they use it, because they've been set no particular guidelines as to how to use it, but some of them are employing extra tutorials from retired teachers to come in and help the kids who are struggling with their reading, their writing, or whatever. So there are some innovative ideas out there, and it's being used to reduce the funding gap. It is, to what Rona said there in terms of if a kid, is suffering abject poverty and they may not be able to participate in some of the activities. I think that is innovative in terms of their attainment. So it's not just about, it's across the spectrum of education. But it's this idea, when is it going to be judged, whether we have, without those guidelines that go along with it. So I think that the head teachers, and there may be a few, but they are being innovative. The head teacher are using their PEF funding, to look at this attainment gap, as rightly so. The other thing that's interesting with what Patsy said, there were kids who may not have taken up their free school meals. So you wouldn't have got the £1,200 going into that school. And head teachers did encourage those who did qualify to make sure that they were applying for that, so they got the maximum amount of money coming into their school. So again, head teachers were on the ball on that one. So it's just how it's going to be judged at the end of the day, and I think that's what the two previous were saying. They weren't sure.
Do we wish a report or some further information? I mean, it might have to go to SIPL, but we can ask for it to come here. Well, Rona can keep us right on that.
Chair, we've got this report here. We patently obviously don't feel that it tells us how the money is being spent. I suppose part of our audit job is to audit how or track the funding that comes into schools. But I would have hoped that we could ask SIPL to do a really good report. And I mean, let's see the schools that are receiving. Let's see how they're spending their money. Let's see how they've improved things. And I mean, the money is very welcome, let's face it. I mean, there's plenty it could be spent on, but we need to know that it's been spent on wisely and achieving what it's meant to be doing. And from what we get at the moment, this doesn't tell us anything.
It says here at the end that we will get a follow-up review in September 2019, but that's a year away.
But if the review is the
I
same
think
as
we need
this,
something before that.
if the review is the same as this, it doesn't tell us any more. It won't tell us any more. So what kind of review do we want? And absolutely, it's a long way away.
Yeah, I think when the officers were here last time, it was about giving Audit that information over a period, and it would be next year. But I would be happy that we request from the department itself an interim report on how they're progressing with it and what they're doing in order to monitor and what measures they are putting in place, so that the attainment can be measured in time for that review next year. So that would be a reasonable request.
Councillor Scobie?
Is there any way that could be a clawback for the Scottish Government? And I think we need to, as Pat is saying, we need to be careful that, we are making those strides, that the money is being spent, in the best way possible. So we don't, if it claws back, where are we going to find that if they do? I hope the Scottish Government don't.
They could send Audit Scotland in today and say, let's see how Dumfries and Galloway Council are spending their PEF money. And I don't know that we'd be able to show what we've been doing with it. And we certainly wouldn't be able to show that we have been auditing it all the way along.
Yeah, I think it's that we just understand the guidelines, and the role in this committee wouldn't be to impose our different view of what it's been spent on, but we need to know what guidelines are working to in spending that and how they're measuring what it's achieving. I think that would be an appropriate role for this committee.
I think if they get to the clawback position, we could finish up with an awful rash of coffee mornings and things like that from individual schools. Councillor Gilder.
But surely our job as an Audit and Risk and Scrutiny Committee is to highlight something to the Service Committee that perhaps, and I mean, I think that's what we're doing here. It's not all about us getting all the thing, it's about them doing something about it. So, I mean, that would be my suggestion as well.
We'll put that in a recommendation when we get to the end. Any other comments? Councillor Scobie? Sorry, Mr. Fox.
Can I just give one reassurance? There are records being kept of how the money has been spent for each individual school, so it's not going into the general school budget and disappearing. I know that from the audit that we did before, but not
So it should be relatively easy to get us a report?
Yes.
Councillor Scobie?
It's just moving on, and the next one is the project and programme management on this one. And the first paragraph there gives me rise for concern. The Council recently adopted minimal standards and guidance for project and programme management. And it goes on in the paragraph starting, we reported that management boards operated at directorate level. In most cases, the large number of projects meant that meetings did not always have enough time to provide close oversight. Again, I'm just referencing the waterfront in Stranraer. And I'll refer back to, if we didn't have a local paper like the Free Press, we wouldn't know what's going on. But here we have Finlay Carson, our MSP. Minister reveals council missed waterfront deadlines. Now, for me, in terms of, we used to work on Prince 2, I think it was. And we moved away from that. And now we've got this. Are we on top of this as a project board? And are we, is somebody closely scrutinising what's going on, if indeed there's anybody there to do it? And when you read things like this in a local paper, that I, as a member, a local member, knew absolutely nothing about it. So who's managing these projects and that we are attaining what we should be attaining? That's scandalous, and I'm pleased that Finlay's taken it up, or he's going to be taking it up. But we should be doing it in terms of this report and adopting minimal standards. There's an air of silence that frightens me. And as a local member in Stranraer, and I'm only using that as an example, where else is this going on? And are we really managing and auditing what's going on in departments? This one in particular.
I'm sure Mr. Fox will have an answer.
Thank you, Councillor Scobie. There is an ongoing project and programme management working group which meets, I think it's 3 or 4 times a year. The 10 minimum standards we have in place are based on, I think they originated from the Prince 2 methodology. So I think they are based around Prince 2. The standards themselves, they're available to you if you wish to see them, certainly in the public domain. As internal audit, we've looked at a number of capital projects over the years, as I'm sure you're aware and have been to these meetings. And I think I would refer you to the current management update on this, in terms of they recognised, I think, in the first paragraph, that possibly this level of scrutiny they can manage at directorate level could be improved for certain projects. I'm not sure I can offer much more reassurance at this stage.
Could you repeat that phrase that you just used about future projects? What was it?
I'm referring to the first paragraph in the current management update. The consideration we're given to updating the guidance on those managing programmes, that specific schemes may benefit from being considered as standalone, as opposed to being considered at a meeting where other projects are considered.
Yeah, I'm grateful for the candidness being offered by Mr. Fox, not know your first name. But it's on that last, could be improved. I think that what I would like to see in this one is that using this as an example, that we as the audit committee look at what went wrong here. How did we fail to meet, we missed waterfront deadline? And I think we're entitled to, as an audit committee, I'll be guided, but I think we could use that as an example. If indeed, things can be improved, then is this one area where that needs closer scrutiny and audit?
Yeah, we will be looking for new topics for our scrutiny reviews. So perhaps project and programme management might be one that you would wish to generalise and bring up there.
I would hope we could include that one and use this as an example, but we look for an early report back on this one, because one of the things that in Stranraer, and Mr. Fox's paragraph does refer to value complexity, reputational risk. And the people of Stranraer are fed up of hearing nothing, but then we read this. So I think the council's reputation is, I think it's below rock bottom in terms of the people of Stranraer. So it is. And we need to be able to scrutinise or audit and scrutinise where did things go wrong, and using this as an example to come back with an early report.
I just thought you brought the Free Press in to read it in the blank bits, Willie.
I didn't realise that this would come up to, but however,
We should maybe get it added to the paper. Any other comments? Questions? Malcolm Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. It's actually, I was looking at the capital spend to save. I was also looking at the project management, and in both cases you're saying that the report can be closed, but once again, when I see these sort of things, I never seem to see any kind of timelines management or kind of promising to maybe do something later on. You know, I would like to see that we get confirmation that these remedial actions are actually taking place and when they're liable to take place, rather than perhaps you're just getting fobbed off.
Any comments, sir?
I can only really say point noted, and I look forward to seeing the guidance as well.
Councillor Gilroy.
It's just on the capital spend to save, and it says that it tends to be done by finance and not regularly reported to members, and I just wonder why that is. Because it then goes on to say that some are successful, which is good, presumably those are the ones we hear about, but there are some that are maybe not quite so successful and not viable in purely financial terms. Presumably the whole spend to save, it's all meant to be about financial terms. And it says here that there should be a greater level of scrutiny of project proposals. I mean, I just wonder how that is proposed to be done if it doesn't come to members. And we're relying on finance to take them forward, but some of them are not working. There seems to me that there's a lack of scrutiny on what we're doing as capital spend to save, and that isn't a good way of working.
Yeah, I think the members did take a decision to delegate the decision making for 50,000 and below to the head of finance and procurement. I think that was last year that decision was taken. But I suppose it wouldn't preclude some analysis coming back on what was decided and why. Yeah.
That's all very well, but we don't know the size of these projects. It's not mentioned here. We're not given any indication as to whether it's millions we're dealing with or 20,000. I have no problem with the 50,000 mark. I would agree with that.
Is it on the same point, Malcolm?
It was just if it's projects below 50,000, obviously, if you've got a number of these, then it's turning into quite a significant figure. You know, even if there was a report coming back grouped, where a lot of these things would actually give us a chance to scrutinise it. I mean, my definition in my own business career of a spend to save project would always be that it was what I would term cash neutral, in that you would finance it, spend the money, but you'd be saving more cash in the period. And in which case, you know, the more the merrier of these kind of schemes. If they're working on that basis, it's a really good way to go forward. But I think members do need to be kept informed of whether these things are working, if we're going to scrutinise it properly.
Mr. Fox.
Thank you, Chair. Members have previously received the full internal audit report on the subject, which actually provided more detail as to what these particular schemes were. I don't particularly want to read the entire report out to you, but I can say that some of the reports have actually been some of these projects have actually been subject to member scrutiny in the past, such as the street lighting spend to save, which I know went to EEI, and also the schools PPP energy efficiency, which I know went to both Civil Committee and Policy and Resources Committee. So there has been some scrutiny of that. The other projects that were looked at as part of this audit were the ones below £50,000, as in the Salix project, which is a Scottish Government project, and solar panels on schools and public buildings. And another scheme was a vehicle fleet replacement, which we noted in the original audit report was actually very effective. We basically bought vehicles rather than borrow them, and that money was repaid very quickly. And I also believe the Dumfries Fibre Network, which is another project we looked at, was also considered by members.
Patsy?
Just says in this report here, overall we thought that a greater level of scrutiny of project proposals would minimise the risk of unfunded debt charges arising. So how, if that's a recommendation, how would we go about doing that? I mean, is that at service committees or is it here or?
What did you say to me?
It was just to advise that these are you know, the updates on how people are progressing from the more detailed reports that were done between January and June earlier in the year. So if you would like more detail on updates, we can certainly provide those in at the next committee. These are not intended to be, you know, the full reports. Members have seen those.
Okay, no more. We'll go to recommendations. Oh, sorry, Pat.
No. Heavens above, I'm here. Commercial waste charges. It says in the final paragraph of the first report summary that currently the scope operating is constrained by the PFI contract, but if circumstances changed, blah, blah, blah. And I just wonder if circumstances have changed, if this is different, and if, I mean, that's just you know, we've got a different thing going forward and how this will affect us if we need to look at it again.
I think they've certainly changed. Rona?
Yeah, this is one of the areas that will be worked on in bringing proposals about our future waste service and all that would include. And I think it's September, certainly middle of next year, that the service has been tasked to go to EE&I committee with detailed plans of how the service will look going forward. And I think this is an area, I think Richard's probably done a bit of work on this, that he maybe have a little bit more information on what we could look at to do things differently.
Yeah, it's just that you know, it says at the end of this report, again, members can close this report, but presumably we can't really, can we?
I think we could close this report, but there will be more work coming forward on commercial waste charges going forward in a new reshaped waste service.
So, I saw you rushing for your microphone there. Did you wish to add something?
No, thank you, Chair.
Wise man. Any further comments you wish to bring? Well,
if we close this one, but it will be revisited or however you want to phrase it, because we must keep it on our.
Is that minuted, or do you wish it recommendation? Do you wish that minuted, or do you wish it as a recommendation, Patsy? Okay, we'll go to the recommendations. Note and comment on the progress made by management in addressing internal audit reports as detailed in the appendix. Yes, I'm just coming to decide if any of the internal audit reports are to be included in the next follow-up report to the committee in spring 2019. Do you wish any additional detail or another recommendation put in there? If you could give me some idea of wording, Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, Chair, I think Rona offered up that, and I would like to see the project and programme management board, how this is managed, and indeed to come back with the statement how it could be improved. And I want to use the Stranraer waterfront as a particular reference, and looking at the consequences of missed deadlines, with particular emphasis on responsibility and accountability. Who's responsible? Who's going to be accountable? Who will be accountable at the end of the day? Or are we culpable under these circumstances, and also how things are reported. To read it in the paper is not satisfactory in terms of member information.
Some of us don't need help to look stupid, but that would certainly makes you feel stupid sometimes. Public bring it up. And also we need something on the PEF funding.
Yep.
So, Claire or Rona, could you give me some?
Could I just clarify, Councillor Scobie, would you, it may be more appropriate for a scrutiny review on the project and programme management that we do that rather than it be an internal audit report? It'll give you more freedom for questioning, I think. Yeah. Okay.
As long as the points that and we don't lose the responsibility and accountability. Because again, it could be, if members are we need to know.
Have we got that? Claire, have you got it? Have you got a formal wording?
Yeah, just obviously just noting that you're asking for the project and programme management to be taken forward under the scrutiny review process. I've also got a note here, there was obviously a bit of discussion about PEF, that you were requesting that SIPL undertake an interim review of PEF to provide assurances for the review that has already been agreed that will be undertaken next year. There was a bit of discussion on that. Would you want them to do that, or do you want that? Do you want both?
Well, I would like it to come to this committee. What it's being spent on and the effectiveness of that spending.
I would have thought, to be perfectly honest, the effectiveness would have been a SIPL thing. They should be assessing how well it's been. We need to just, perhaps as an audit committee, just know that the money is there and it's being used appropriately, and there is an audit trail as to, so it can follow. So if, for argument's sake, we got an external audit in to look at it, we have done our job.
Mr. Fox did say that it was being monitored, so it should be relatively easy to get that information.
And I think we would ask the report to outline, what guidelines have been given by the department and what measures they're developing to measure that hopefully a rise in attainment.
The risk is that we get inspected and found wanting, and they want the money back. So I mean that's that's the risk. So we have to mitigate that risk, really, don't we, as best we can.
Have you got that encapsulated, Claire? Well, sorry.
Claire read back what the one was on project and programme management. Could I also have, as a matter of record, that we use the Stranraer waterfront missed deadlines as an example to be scrutinised, with communication, responsibility and accountability very much featuring in that report that comes back. Thank you.
Happy with that, folks? Anything else you wish to add? Of course, you're out of ink. Right, we'll move on to item 6, internal audit reports issued in the third quarter of 2018, which are in your supplementary papers, not for item 5, as we mentioned at the start. Everybody happy? Councillor Johnson.
You should know better than that, Graham. I can come up with a few questions. The debt written off 880,000. But the figure that I found really rather surprising, and you refer to it, I think, in your recommendations, is in this 4.27. 35% of the total outstanding debt was invoices under query. That doesn't fill me full of confidence that our charging regime is right. I was also surprised that there was no automation of our automated means of checking instalment plans. That seemed a bit lax. And then we were on, I think it's the one on income management and the cash reconciliations. I was a wee bit surprised that a council, an organisation of this size, is still dependent on people inputting things in the spreadsheet and manually reconciling. I find that a bit bizarre, to be honest. And as everyone knows with spreadsheets are open to alteration quite easily. I don't actually think it's you say in your report that you're quite happy that it's quite secure, but a bank rec done on a spreadsheet, I do find in the council a bit surprising, to say the least.
Chair, may I take the two reports separately and deal with, first of all, the debtors report? You will note within paragraph 426 that management have acknowledged that greater scrutiny is required in the area of holds. And my understanding is, although I'm not an expert, is that at least some of that 35% of long-term holds relates to social services debt, where it's not appropriate to actively pursue the debt at this time due to people going to care homes and other such circumstances. But as it's been noted within the report, there is also a reference in paragraph 428 to recognise that a policy and procedure is required for dealing with such cases, and this will be developed. So I think your concern is recognised, and we're waiting on further work in that area. Are you happy for me to go back to income management, or?
Mr Johnson wishes to.
It's just on that point. I fully understand the difficulty in chasing up debts like that, and the sensitivity is obviously very important. And a previous life, I worked for British Gas, and we had very similar problems in pursuing debts. And it's important that you have a policy in place that recognises the difficulties and personal circumstances of people and don't make their situation any worse. I fully grasp that.
Just wanted to touch on the income reconciliation, which you referred to. Having not been involved in this audit, I went to have a look at this reconciliation myself on Tuesday, just so I'd understand it a bit better. I have actually looked at it before, and you're quite right, this reconciliation process has been the same since I joined the council, which was 15 years ago. And I can only acknowledge that the reconciliation actually works. So I think they have in the past tried to move it onto an electronic system and decided to go back to the old way. Whether it should be electronic, I don't know. I just know it works.
Who would make that decision? Would that be head of finance, or would it be the management chief executive, or would it be the members?
As to how the reconciliation would actually be done, it would be somewhere within the finance service that would do it, whether it be the head of finance or, I'm trying to think of his job title, I know who the officer is, but someone more junior would actually decide how the reconciliation was done. I'm not sure that would be an issue for members.
No, it would be an operational matter, but I'm certainly happy to highlight the concern to Head of Finance and Procurement. Not that you're suggesting there's anything wrong with it, you've had that assurance, but just about, should that be how we're doing things going forward in a modern organisation?
Would that be just in a word from you, or does it need a recommendation in here?
I don't think we need to put it in the minute, but I'll certainly put it in an email, and I'll copy the member in Councillor Johnson into the member to the email.
Okay. Any other members? Anything? Councillor Scobie.
Just a small point. I'm trying to keep it, in case I'll be accused of saying something on everything. It seems to be the other places. However, 4.2, a management review of banking facilities has not taken place for a couple of years. And it goes on to say just how involved it is in changing banks. Who would consider that, notwithstanding that well, it's reference here, there needs to be savings. But, you know, on ethical grounds or issues that may come up, it's very much Bank of Scotland, this one, and I'm not criticising current. Bank of Scotland and then Santander and another. Who would determine, you know, is it a bank that we would wish to remain? Perhaps not on financial grounds, but ethical grounds.
Mr. Fox. Yeah. Mr. Fox.
In terms of whether we wish to deal with a bank in terms of our trading with them, there's actually papers that go, I think it is, to Policy and Resources Committee on Treasury Management, which deal with who our approved bankers are. So within that list, there will be building societies. I think the Royal Bank of Scotland's included in the list, and a number of others. So that is considered by members. It's a slightly separate issue as to whether Bank of Scotland have been our main bankers for a number of years, as you'll be aware. But there are ways that we benchmark to find out whether we're getting good value for money, but I'm not really sure that's the thrust of your question.
Could I clarify? And I believe there's a select committee in Westminster looked at the Royal Bank of Scotland, if I'm correct in that, and the closures of the banks. And indeed, they were trying to influence the Royal Bank of Scotland to keep branches open. Now, equally, if there was ethical reasons that we would say, well, you know, we want a change, so it's to the ethical reasons rather than financial. And I would presume full council would have the ultimate saying that, but is there a committee? Would that go to Policy and Resources or whatever? And when would it, you know, is it something that is focused and we would get a report to the appropriate committee?
I think it's P&R, but Rona?
Yeah, definitely Policy and Resources Committee. That would be you're in when that report was there, but certainly I know that the pensions funds have had some look at what they're investing in. There's been some motions going around about fracking and things like that in American companies. Yeah.
There are certainly members out there who have got strong feelings about ethical banks, the ethics of banks. Anyone else wish to say anything before we go to recommendations? Okay. Members are asked to note and comment on the internal audit reports finalised. I think we've done that. You've taken some notes from it, Rona, and you will act on those, I presume. Okay. Item 7, risk management update. Rona, do you wish to speak?
Just a very few words. You know, obviously the committees. This committee's been up and running for over a year now. I think we've made excellent progress in the last few months on our scrutiny function, and our audit function has been quite constant. But this is time now, I think, to turn our heads to risk. It becomes an ever more important topic, and certainly members mention it more at different meetings. So we have updated the Council's risk management framework that applies to officers, but also to members. And members, depending on what committee they're sitting on, whether it's a service committee or this committee, have different roles to play in the management and oversight of risk within the organisation. So this paper is simply to raise awareness that the committee will now focus a little more on risk, and that training will be organised for members before the December committee. I think that would help members of this committee know what their particular role is when sitting here. We are working on some draft, just some very simple guidance to introduce the topic. That draft is there, and we will finalise that over the next couple of weeks and make sure it's available to members, and also arrange the date for training.
Councillor Johnson.
Yeah, I noticed when we're talking about training for staff that we've got e-learning courses being prepared for that. Would it not be possible to do something similar for members, because it's not always convenient for us all to come together at the same time.
I'd certainly be happy to do that, and even if you would prefer the training to be by some sort of webinar that you can then look at any time that's convenient to you, I'm happy to speak to some, even our colleagues in External Audit or Audit Scotland, to provide materials to allow that to happen.
Mr. Scobie.
Hi, I'm not sure if I would, training or whatever, or what kind of training would get me, but I'm particularly interested in the topics, the content of the training. And we don't operate under an adversarial regime in terms of the way that maybe select committees do in some of our parliaments. But maybe we should look at that and see whether we do think that's appropriate and what that would mean. With particular reference, there are other authorities, and I think it was the borders, that operate with their audit and scrutiny, a call-in mechanism where a decision is taken, and I know we've got a 48-hour rule under that, but audit and risk in the borders can call in a decision. Yeah, and under the cabinet system, I know, and we looked at that a year or so ago in that, and maybe even longer. But I think it's the training in terms of risk. It's other systems that operate, so it's that type of training. And much better, I prefer a face-to-face that we're able to exchange information and because not everybody's the font of all knowledge.
I'm happy to have both options available, because I think it's important, and we might even need more than one training session. So certainly officers are just taking little steps with this just to absorb it and make sure they're introducing it into their everyday practices.
I thought, Councillor Scobie, you were famed for being adversarial.
Not true.
Any other members? Any other members got anything before we go to the recommendations? Okay. The members are asked to note the progress being made to implement the risk management framework. You've got a couple of things there to add in as well.
And training will be organised both face-to-face and by electronic means.
Okay. Item 8, scrutiny review. Thank you, Mr. Fox. Oh, sorry, we're doing number 9 first, yes. My mistake. Well done, Rona. If I can find the damn thing. Yes. Just page 189, it's misnumbered. Just to confuse you even further. Okay? Scrutiny review, improving information data sharing, feedback from workshop. We've got the right one this time?
Yep, yep.
Are we on the right page? We're all on the same page, are we? Wonders never cease. Members, or have you anything to add to the report? You good people, no? Members, have you anything to ask?
We had a good session in the workshop around, the sharing of information and so forth, and that we were at the basic, I think it was said, sharing of information. But, again, I could, give you an example where I was dealing in casework with one where an OT had gone out to the individual, individual but family concerned, and the recommendation back was to do a lift up through the ceiling and so forth. Then that didn't meet with the satisfaction, there was no consultation, but the important part to this is the person and family got anxious and stressed out about it, and then the nurses, the visiting nurses, whatever you call them, came in and said, That's no suitable for you, and so forth. So there was no sharing of information in that respect between health, which is referred to health and social care integration. And it's that sharing of information when something is being considered. So while it was said it was basic, I have raised the case, but I think we need to look closely at this whole sharing, and particularly around vulnerable people. How do we get to that point where it's effective sharing?
Thank you. The point was discussed sort of during with regards to the basic information. I think from the workshop we're accepting this evidence and then into the recommendations, which is the next paper, which I think we put forward the suggestions to push the IJB and the work forward to make sure that we get better information in the future.
Any other comments? No? Go to the recommendations. Happy to go to the recommendations, members. Consider the evidence and information collected at the workshop held on the 10th September as detailed in Appendix, that's 2.1, and agree this should be added to the evidence gathered for the Improving Information Data Sharing Scrutiny Review. Okay? Thank you. We'll go back to...
Commend the officers for the work that they've put in these workshops, and I think it has been worthwhile just to actually hone in many of these subjects, and we're still not finished.
Yes, credit where it's due. You should all blush. You should blush. Anyway, go back to item 8, if we could. I go back the way. And I don't know, I'm going to ask governance or Rona or somebody, could we get the papers right the next time? We've got the wrong appendix, we've got the wrong, this is labelled for item 5 and it was item 6. Item 8 was labelled twice when it was actually item 9. Rona?
No, it's with apologies. The print unit last week were under quite a lot of pressure with the full council papers. And we were running a little late with those, and it had a knock-on impact, and then the weather. So I will be having a meeting with the print unit, but they're not usually the odd error, but these ones I appreciate. I've got a number, and we'll do our best to sort that out.
All right, Chairman, I'm sure you would note that we used to have a print unit in Sederunt.
Centralisation's a great thing, isn't it, Willie? I also would like to say that to inundate members with must have been 1,000 pages in the full council papers, and for us mere mortals to be expected to absorb that and regurgitate it is quite an exhausting exercise, and then to have to sit through 6 or 7 or 8 hours of hell, to get to the end of it is even worse. But yes, I mean, this has been a big week. I mean, with a lot of papers for council, we've got 2 committees today, we've got 2 committees tomorrow, I think. I'm not on them, but there's 2 committees tomorrow. It's quite a lot for us mere mortals. Could we spread it out a wee bit further? Right. Scrutiny review, improving information data sharing, draft recommendations. Anyone wish to add anything to that? Sir.
I'll just come back in response to Councillor Scobie's comment on the previous item. Recommendations 1, 2, 3 put forward a process and some sort of indication of how they're going to progress, taking that basic information in recommendation 1 and having that done by the end of this year, where they're sharing the basic information from clients. 2 should be monitoring the transition between the training of staff to increase the amount of information, and then 3 is looking at additional organisations being involved once the process is up and running.
Members? Councillor Gilroy.
It was just something about the electronic systems that the council uses and NHS use, which seem to be different, and yet we're meant to be all talking to each other. Are those not compatible, or are they going to make them compatible, or what's going to happen? Because presumably that is the ultimate goal. But we're using Mosaic or whatever it's called, and I thought that we used to use Portal. I thought that was something we did and gone by. Anyway, just asking if that's the plan for the future.
As far as the information is going, they're setting a system up between the Mosaic, which is the council system, Portal, which is the NHS system, and they are looking at how they merge those two, be it that there's an extension to Portal or that there's a web process. They are currently now able to start sharing that information. I think in the last workshop they discussed they'd had a match, 99.7% match of the data that's gone across. So they are currently able to do it. I would have to get the ICT people back in to talk about how the actual systems talk, but they are now talking.
I don't think we need to know how they do it. I just think we kind of need to know that it's working.
My fear is the 0.3% will be the controversial bit. Anyone else? I have a note down here about timescales. When those recommendations, can you give us any indication about that?
So yes, the process will now be on accepting these 6 recommendations. The chair of Audit Risk Scrutiny Committee will present these to full council for acceptance, and then will then challenge the individual services to deliver and report back the following year on how they're doing. Sorry, the other thing is, I think we agreed in one of the workshops to discuss to have people back within 6 months just to see how we're going in respect to recommendation 1, which was the sharing of the basic information.
Okay. This will come to the next full council, will it?
Yeah, December council, full council's the understanding.
Can we firm this up by putting it in the recommendations?
Yes.
Yes, that was meaning. Carry on, Rhoda.
No, I think the point that had been made from the papers when some members read them was that they actually want timescales put in the recommendations that go to full council. Yes. So I think there might be an opportunity for us to get those and discuss them at a workshop that we've already got planned under the other item to get those timescales agreed before it goes to full council.
That's where I was trying to get to. Members, are you happy with that? Can we get that into a recommendation? Do you need a wording for that, Claire?
I'm just noting that there'll be timescales for your recommendations and the report that goes to full council in December, and your workshop will be arranged.
That's fine. Okay.
Sorry.
With all this toing and froing, I think we now go on to number 10. Is that right? Scrutiny review. Grow the local economy through the procurement process, feedback from workshops. Do you wish to say anything on this? Members? Malcolm Johnson.
It's just to point out on the meeting of the 9th of July, I'm down as apologies, but I was actually there.
I have highlighted here that evidence from the workshop suggested that the procurement processes conducted by Cumbria County and Carlisle City Councils offered greater opportunity to support local businesses. Could somebody maybe elaborate on that for me?
Through the workshops, we've received information. I'm trying to recall which one, but where one of the people provided evidence had given indication of how Cumbria City Council, Cumbria County Council and Carlisle City Councils conducted their procurement and gave the impression that there was favourability. Now, we know that the procurement rules don't allow that sort of actions, but they were saying that through the scoring system that there was benefits to local businesses, mainly through the concept of how they provide information, some aspects such as local companies won't talk about the modern apprenticeships, but external companies would say that they'll take on an apprentice. Travel, economic, environmental impact wouldn't be so, can receive sort of greater scoring. So it was really to look at that information. It'd come back from sort of the evidence, and I think members have requested that we get some further details on how they operate to stay within the guidelines and still the perception that they provide better support to local businesses.
Was that, has that been backed up by evidence, or was that just hearsay?
Our intention is, following this meeting today, is to have conversations with Cumbria and Carlisle to do sort of a desk-based exercise, gather that information, plus following on workshops to gather further information.
Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, it was the guy that was the architect that brought that information. Then there was a further one on the same day when we met in the municipal chambers, and how it's weighted. Carlisle operate a system that weights in favour of local businesses, still keeping within the English legislation, obviously, but you would imagine the same would apply here. So it wasn't just anecdotal, it was evidence that we took on that day from two employers that came and gave us their expertise. So I think, in terms of local businesses, I think it's something that we should be examining, if nothing else, to see, is that something? And I go back many, many years to the windy cleaner, Rona, and procurement, and how do we, where at that time, and I think it's still the same, windy cleaning was put out to a Newcastle company. We've got, so how do we grow the local economy, as it says, and yet still that local firms are able to apply?
Somewhere in the back of my mind, recesses, which are fairly vague sometimes, but something flags up 5% benefit for local businesses.
Just to pick up, it was session 1 and session 3 of the 20th of August workshop on page 201. There was a discussion about a premier supply service where contractors, if they wanted to be paid quickly, would get a 2.5% less payment, but a lot of local services signed up to that system. So if they were part of the premier supply service, it was advantageous within the procurement process because it meant that Cumbria and Carlisle were able to make payments quicker and make savings. So whilst their bid might have been higher in theory, this is from the discussion, 2.5% meant that there was a saving beyond that. The other aspect in there was that the scoring was based upon health and safety experience of organisations, sustainability, and then there was a variable fourth section, which quality management or service-specific scoring, dependent on how they would work it. And my final point would be that there was emphasis, and I think members welcomed the emphasis of how price wasn't as heavily scored. It was still a high scoring, between 60 or 70% of the overall aspect, but the other 4 areas would be able to influence how we go. We would always note that obviously the information we received is the perceptions of the organisations, and that's why we need to go and sit down and discuss with those with Cumbria and Carlisle to understand fully how it works and how they've managed to deliver that service.
Councillor Johnson.
I think I raised this at that session, that one of the issues I can see with this 30% is you start having 30%, which a large part of it becomes a subjective decision, which can potentially then lead perhaps to the people coming to the conclusion that people are being favoured. It makes it a lot harder to be transparent when you're starting to put in little conditions, because how can you say sponsoring the local football team is more or less valuable than sponsoring the rugby team, for example? It does make it actually quite difficult to keep transparency and to appear to be fair at times. So a great deal of thought would have to go into how you evaluate that 30%.
Sorry, I think one of the things that has come out of the workshops and the procurement front is the process of transparency and how the applications in Dumfries and Galloway are sort of looked at. It's 3 people are required to have a look at it. So that there's a process of consensus towards that decision, but taking on board your point, is that may well not be the organisation's bidding saying how do you classify it, but at least I think we were provided assurances during the workshops that it's not just one person who says, actually that's how I score it, so there's 3 people making that assessment, but we can pick up how Cumbria and Carlisle attempt to get around those.
How do we pick the 3 people? How do we choose the 3 people?
From my recollections from the meeting, one is from the service that's procuring it, one is from procurement, and then a third one I think is chosen by the 2 people who are doing
They're
it.
coming with different skills, different knowledge.
Yeah. And my understanding is that it's a minimum of 2, but ideally 3. At the moment, obviously, it's the procuring service and procurement officer.
Happy members? That's maybe too strong a word. I like to be happy, Willie. Okay, I'm going to go to the recommendations if nobody else has any points to make. And members are asked to consider the evidence and information collected at the workshops held on 9th of July and 20th of August, as are detailed in appendices 1 and 2. Agree this should be added to the evidence gathered for the Grow the Local Economy through Procurement Process Scrutiny Review. And 2.3, agree to hold further workshops to review the local procurement process and conduct desktop research in preparation for final recommendations to be presented to this committee at its meeting on the 10th of December. And I presume that's when you'll come back and tell us if Carlisle Council was telling us lies or not. Okay. Happy with that? I have no further business. Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, and I did ask for a report. I raised it at not the full council there, but the one before, with regards to the waste PFI, and asked that a report come back to this committee. I'm quite happy to raise it under any. We don't have a report before us, but I think we should. And for that report to look at the structures that were considered at the time, what structures were considered at the time, and for these to be examined in terms of was there something else that should have been looked at in the report. How much has been spent on the waste PFI since agreeing that's as the method, and who ultimately is responsible for what happened and who will be made accountable. These are the areas for audit that I would internal. I would look for an early report back.
You don't wish to add in the rollout of the 3-bin job? You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, we had it in Wigtonshire, and the amount of money that was spent on the first to then go into Ballymena, I think it was, to look at a second system, and that system has never been rolled out, and you know what the effect of that, you know, viability of that whole scheme. Vehicles purchased, you know, and different things stored. You know, so we need to, you know, and I don't think it's for a matter of anyone to stand up and say, you know, the department did well, you know, and to thank officer. I think we've got to look at it, and it's for this committee to closely audit what went wrong here.
Yeah, I think certainly note the topic, and I know that the chair of the committee is not here today, is supportive of the topic. If I could just maybe have time to discuss with the internal auditor, chief internal auditor who's on holiday, how this is best achieved. I mean, should it be a report from the service that you might want to scrutinise, or should it be an internal audit report that is then brought to you?
I think under administration, and so look, we're not accused of maladministration. I think that there's vested interest in the service committee. So I think it should be an internal audit, so that there is no because it does state in the extract on maladministration that there is vested interest there in the department. And really, the department should have been doing it anyway to find out that, rather than what we had at full council. And now, it's my opinion that it should be Audit and Risk Committee by an internal audit. And that should be part of the work of the internal audit, not by committee.
Councillor Gilroy.
I would go a step further, and I think it should be an external audit. I think the council shouldn't be auditing itself on this item, if I'm being perfectly honest. I think we pay external auditors, we pay them a lot of money. This has been a big issue, and I think we should ask them to do a piece of work for us.
If you would allow me time to discuss that with the Chief Executive and my Director, and I'll come back to you on that.
Give it till Monday.
Okay.
Okay, I have no other competent business. Thank you for your attendance. Delighted to see you all.